Well, hello again and welcome to everyone in the room this evening and to those accessing the recording. My name is Amelia McCulloch and I'm your host from CEAV, and we are pleased to present this webinar, VTAC, Your Guide to Applying for Tertiary Study in Victoria 2020. We would like to start with the acknowledgement of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation of the land of which CEAV is based on. We pay our respects to elders past and present and emerging leaders who are following the footsteps of those who came before. We'd also like to thank the Department of Education and Training for allowing us the use of platform Cisco WebEx to present to you today. That said, it is also my great pleasure to introduce Michael from VTAC, who will be presenting the session this evening. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks very much, Amelia, and welcome everyone. It's great to see all of you here. It's Michael from VTAC here, and I'll be taking you through tonight's session. Please do feel free to use that Q&A button as we go through to type in questions. We've already had a question, which is whether we'll be covering SEAS applications and scholarships. And yes, we'll be going through all aspects of the application process, including SEAS and scholarships. So what I'll do is just start off by talking a bit about who VTAC is and what we do. VTAC is a non-profit agency that's owned by all the universities and most of the TAFEs in Victoria. And we process the applications on their behalf. So for those of you who are in Year 12 or who are looking to study next year, you won't be sending off individual applications to, for example, RMIT and Swinburne and Monash. You'll be applying once through VTAC with preferences for up to 8 different courses throughout the state. Our other role is to calculate the ATAR, or the Australian Tertiary Admission Rank, for Year 12 students or who are doing the VCE. So we'll talk a bit about that at the end of the session as well. Before I get into the whole application process, I just want to briefly touch on the impact of COVID-19 and what that means. It's obviously been quite a disruptive year for everyone, particularly if you've been trying to do Year 12 this year. There's been many, many challenges. But the good news is that there is still a clear pathway for every Year 12 to go on to tertiary study, just as there would have been in previous years. So all of the tertiary admission centres and the universities, TAFEs and colleges and the state governments are working together to make sure there's a clear pathway across the country for all Year 12 students to go on to tertiary study. If you want to keep up to date with the latest impact of COVID-19 in terms of VTAC applications, you can go to our website and click on the VTAC updates about COVID-19 page, and you'll see the latest information. We do update that regularly whenever there are new announcements or new things required as a result of various developments. As a bit of a bird's eye view here of the application process, I've got some of the key dates up here on the screen. These dates are all available on the VTAC website, so don't worry about taking a screenshot or copying them down at this point. They are all online on the dates and fees page. Before I get into the detail though, it's just kind of helpful to have a bit of a look at the various stages of the application process. So we're here now in August. Applications are already open. So you can go online after this and make your application. You might have already done that, which is great. If you have already applied or made an account and you learn something tonight which changes what you would have done, that's fine, because everything you do with VTAC, you can always go back and make changes until the relevant closing date. So things are open now, and it's important that you apply by the end of September. That 30th of September date is the date to apply by to make sure that you are paying the lowest application fee. If you're applying for special consideration scholarships, those applications are due a few days later on the 9th of October. Once these steps are done here, the actual applications, that's a bit of a break for you in terms of applications. You can focus on other things like your exams and your studies and so on. And then we pick up again here at the end of December when your ATAR will be released this year, a bit later than usual. Even after your ATAR is released, you do still have some time where you can change your preferences once you know your results and your ATAR. And then the majority of offers come out here in the middle of January, with a few more opportunities later on, and most courses starting classes in late February or early March. So that's a bit of an overview of all the key dates, but those dates are also online as well, including many more dates and other deadlines too. So what we'll do tonight is go through that whole process, starting off with how to find course information, and importantly, what to look for to make sure you're eligible and you've got the best chance of getting in. We'll then go through how to actually put your application in, your preferences, and all the other things that go with that. We'll also discuss special consideration and scholarships relatively briefly, and then go on to actually receiving your offer and what to do with it. And as I mentioned, we'll also wrap up with a bit of a chat about scaling and the ATAR as well, which is obviously really important for Year 12 students this year. I'll try to give you as much information as I can tonight, but there is a lot more information online as well. So if you are looking for more information, or if you forget something that you hear tonight and you want to look it up again, you can go to the VTAC website, which is vtac.edu.au, and just click on the guide for your year level. If you're in Year 12, you'll see that use the Year 12 guide, which includes all the step-by-step instructions on how to apply. If you're in Year 10 or Year 11, it's great that you're getting all this information now about the application process, but you won't actually make a VTAC account and submit your application until you are in Year 12. You do it the year before you want to start at university, TAFE, or college. All right, well, let's jump right into it then and talk a bit about finding courses, how to actually look for course information and how to interpret that information as well. In Victoria, there's no printed course guides. There's no booklet that you can flip through of all the courses. All the information is online through course search on the VTAC website. So course search is pretty easy to use. It's just like any other search tool that you've used. You type in a keyword like teaching or nursing, and it will show you all the results for that search across the state. Obviously, every uni and TAFE and college all has their own website, and those websites are a great source of information as well. But the advantage of starting with VTAC course search is that you're searching across all of them at once. So you could type in accounting and you'd be able to then compare the different accounting diplomas and degrees at different unis, TAFEs and colleges across the whole state. So it is a really good place to start your search, and you can then also find more detailed information on the university, TAFE or college's own website as well. You'll see a whole range of different types of courses when you're looking in VTAC course search. In Australia, we tend to break up the types of tertiary courses, the ones that you do after high school, into two big groups. There's the vocational education and training, or VET courses, which you can see in blue on the left. And these courses tend to be shorter, maybe 6 months or a year for a certificate 4, or a year or 2 years for a diploma. And these are often very specifically focused on a particular skill or a particular job. So they're a really good way to get some training in particular skills and occupations. They also tend to be a bit more hands-on learning as well, more practical in their focus. The other big group is the higher education courses, which you can see on the right in red. And these are what you might think of as the university courses, like your bachelor degrees. Some of these are about particular occupations or professions, but they're often also a bit broader and include more theoretical knowledge. So for that reason, they tend to be a bit longer, usually 3 years, for example, for a bachelor degree. There's no kind of right answer in terms of which one's better or which one's right for you. It just depends on what you're hoping to achieve with your particular study. If you're looking to get straight into a particular job or industry, a VET qualification might be the fastest way there. If you are looking for more theoretical knowledge about something, then a higher education qualification might be more suitable for you. So you'll see options in the same field as both VET and higher ed, and that's where you can think about what your goals are and therefore which one is more suitable for you in terms of achieving your aims. One other thing to keep in mind in terms of looking at the different types of courses is the idea of a pathway course. So a pathway is one qualification that leads on to another one. So for example, a certificate 4, which leads on to a diploma, or a diploma, which leads on to a bachelor degree. Pathways are good because they give you options about when you can finish studying. So for example, let's say you were looking at a bachelor degree in accounting, but you weren't 100% sure about spending 3 years doing accounting to get that bachelor degree. What you might do, instead of going straight to that bachelor degree, is start off by doing a diploma in accounting, which would be shorter, maybe 1 year. At the end of that 1 year, you've completed the diploma. You can graduate with that diploma. It's a finished qualification, and you could use that to go straight to work if you wanted to. Or if you decide that you did want to do more study in accounting, you could then use that diploma to apply for admission to the Bachelor of Accounting, and you can usually get credit for all the study you've done as part of the diploma, which means you'd be able to finish the bachelor degree in 2 years rather than 3. So you haven't taken any extra time, but you've gained the ability to exit after that 1 year. Pathways can also be good if you're not quite sure about getting into a particular course, because the entry requirements for diploma courses are often a bit lower than for bachelor degrees. So they can also be good options if you're not sure about getting in. So you'll see both of those types of courses in Course Search in that big list of results. And when you click on any of the course names, you'll open up this page which shows you a lot more details about that particular course. All of this information is provided by the University TAFE or college which offers the course. We've got a fact sheet on our website that goes through how to interpret some of that information. But the stuff at the top is pretty self-explanatory. All this stuff here in terms of the name of the course, how many years it takes to complete, which campus you do it at, that kind of thing. And importantly, the course outline, which gives you some information about the course and describes the course from the point of view of the university, TAFE or college. But there's two other sections to pay attention to, and we'll go through both of those now, starting off with the essential requirements and admission criteria. This section tells you what you have to do to be eligible for that course, what criteria they're using to decide who gets in. The other section to pay attention to for courses that use the ATAR is called the ATAR profile. And this tells you how competitive that particular course is, how hard it might be to get in. So we'll talk about both of these sections now, starting off with the essential requirements and the admission criteria. For most courses in Victoria, it's competitive to get in. There are more people applying for that course than there are available places. The course has got some way of figuring out who gets in, who gets those limited places. And they've got to publish those requirements ahead of time through VTAC Course Search. So when you're applying for a course, you'll always know what criteria they're using to decide who gets in. The course can decide to use whatever they want, and you'll see a whole range of different factors published for different courses through VTAC Course Search. We'll go through a few examples here on the screen now, starting off with prerequisites, which are really common. All the university courses have prerequisites. A prerequisite is a specific VCE subject that you must have completed to be able to get an offer for that course. Most commonly English, but you might also see maths or sciences for some courses. If the course has prerequisites, these are compulsory. You won't get an offer without that particular subject, even if your ATAR is 99.95. So it is really important to pay attention to the prerequisites and make sure you're eligible for the courses that you're applying for. Another thing that you might see sometimes is something called the personal statement, which is an online form that you can fill out through your VTAC account, where you can talk about things like your motivation for study and experience and so on. I'm mostly mentioning it now because this requirement is usually just for mature age applicants who are talking about their experience. So if you're in year 12, before you spend the time filling out the VTAC personal statement, double check whether any of the courses you're applying for actually want to hear this from year 12 students. And that might save you a bit of time in not filling that out unless you actually have to. If you're looking at doing teaching or education, you'll probably need to take an online test, which is called the CASPER test. This is an online test that's not about your academic ability, so it's not about your English or your maths ability. It's about things like your empathy and ethics and professionalism and problem solving. So all those non-academic skills and qualities that the institutions are looking for when choosing who's going to be a teacher. So keep an eye out for that one if you are looking at doing a teaching course. The last one here is an example of something that's optional. So not every requirement is compulsory. Sometimes there are extra things that you can do or that apply to you that might give you a bit of a boost. And this is an example of one. It's called subject adjustments. These are particular subjects that are not required to get into the course. So they're not prerequisites. But if you have done these subjects, you get a bit of a bonus. You get some extra points for completing those particular subjects. Not every course offers subject adjustments, but if they are available for a course, you'll always see them published in VTAC Course Search, and it will tell you what subject, what score you need, and how many extra points you get. So it's all very transparent there, and you'll see it in VTAC Course Search. I won't go through all of the other ones, and there's even more that aren't on the screen, but whatever the requirement is, you'll always see more information in VTAC Course Search about how to complete it. So it won't just say interview, for example. There'll be a heading that says interview, but below that, there'll be instructions about what they're looking for in the interview and how to set it up. There might be a link for you to click on to book your interview, or it might say that they'll call you after you put the course down as a preference. So whatever the requirement is, there will be further information about how to complete it on the inside VTAC Course Search. The last thing to say about these requirements is that you'll see two different kinds of requirements when you're looking in VTAC Course Search. So first of all, you'll see the requirements for selection, which are the things that you have to do to get in. So things like the prerequisites and any other compulsory requirements. But you'll also see requirements for enrolment or graduation. You don't need these ones to actually get an offer for a course. These ones are more like advance warning of requirements down the track. For example, lots of nursing courses will have clinical placements as part of the course, and you have to have certain immunizations before you can do those clinical placements. If you don't get the immunizations, you can't do your placements and you can't graduate. So you don't need the immunizations to get your offer, but they're warning you now that if you do get the offer, you'll need those immunizations at some point to be able to complete the course. The next section, or last section to look at particularly in terms of course search, is called the ATAR profile, which gives you information about how hard it might be to get in, how competitive the course is if it uses the ATAR. Before we get to those numbers though, we've got to take a step back and think a bit about how selection works for courses in Victoria. As I mentioned, it is competitive for most courses. So what's happening at the end of the year is that every course is looking at a big list of everyone who applied for that course. Regardless of what preference number they put the course down as, every single person who applied is going to be considered, and they're going to be given a ranking in accordance with the criteria that were published in Course Search. So what we're going to do now is do that for an example course that's got 6 people applying for 4 available places. This course is using the ATAR, but it's also taking into account special consideration through Cs, which we'll talk about a bit later on, and also giving out some of those subject adjustments for specific VCE subjects, which we talked about earlier. Let's go through now and rank all of our applicants, starting off with Mel, who has an ATAR of 95. Mel does not receive any adjustment factors, so her selection rank of 95 is the same as her ATAR. Then we have Jerry with an ATAR of 90. Jerry's done one of those relevant VCE subjects, which was published in VTAC Course Search for this course, and that's increased her selection rank, so it's 94. It's higher than her ATAR. Third on our list is Victoria with an ATAR of 85. Victoria does not receive any adjustment factors, so her selection rank of 85 is the same as her ATAR. Then we have Emma, the same again. No adjustment factors, so her ATAR and selection rank are both the same at 80. Fifth on our list is AJ with an ATAR of 75. AJ has received special consideration through Cs and has also done one of those relevant subject adjustments. So his selection rank of 86 is significantly higher than his ATAR of 75. And last on our list is Howie with an ATAR of 70. Again, no adjustment factors, so Howie's selection rank is also 70. And this process is happening for every single course that you apply for. Your ATAR itself never changes. That's always the number that you received at the end of the year. But what does change with things like special consideration and other adjustment factors is your selection rank for individual courses. When it comes time to make the offers, we just go down that list of selection ranks from top to bottom, and it's the 4 highest selection ranks that get the 4 available offers. If we look at those same offers, though, in order of the ATAR on the other side, you can see it wasn't the highest ATARs who got the offers, it was the highest selection ranks. The selection rank's really important, and that's important to remember when you're looking at the information that gets published in the ATAR profile, because you'll see a lot of numbers for courses that use the ATAR. You'll see the highest, median, and lowest ATAR to receive an offer, and you'll also see the highest, median, and lowest selection rank to receive an offer. So you might think that the lowest ATAR to receive an offer sounds really useful as a piece of data. But all that tells you is that one person, in this case AJ, got in with that particular ATAR. That does not mean that everyone higher also got in. Emma had a higher ATAR and she did not receive an offer. So it's more useful to look instead at the other side, at the lowest selection rank to receive an offer, because your selection rank only goes up from your ATAR. So if your ATAR in this case had been 85 or higher, you would have received an offer. Everyone above that point received an offer for this course. So look at the lowest selection rank as the most useful piece of information. When you are looking at these numbers, do remember that this information is not set in advance. It's not a guarantee or a cutoff. What you're looking at is last year's data as a guide only. So we don't know next year's lowest selection rank until all of the courses do their ranking and make their offers, and we see who it was who got that very last spot. So what you're looking at is just last year's information purely as a guide. So you should never look at that information, and in this example, you might think, oh, well, my ATAR is lower than 85, so I won't bother applying. It's lower than the lowest selection rank. That's a mistake for 2 reasons. First of all, it's last year's data. So it might change for next year if different people apply or if there is a different number of places available. And second of all, you might get some of those adjustment factors which increase your selection rank. So never look at this data and use it to disqualify yourself. It's just a guide. Okay. Any questions about the course information, including where to find it, what to look for, that kind of thing? Feel free to click that Q&A button and just type in your questions, and I'll read those out and answer those if there are any. I think at this stage we've got none.
We just have one, Michael, just about the CEAS applications and scholarships.
Yep. So I mentioned earlier that we'll cover that a bit later on.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll keep moving for now, but if you do have questions about what I've covered already, feel free to type those into the Q&A and we can come back to those a little bit later on. So now we've found some course information and we can move forward and actually put in our application. So everything you do with VTAC is done online through a VTAC account, which you can create now. It's been open since last week for this year. And all you need is your personal information. So things like your name and email address and your student number. So if you're doing the VCE, that's your VCE student number, which is that 8 numbers and 1 letter. If you're doing the IB, I think it's your personal code, which is those 3 letters and 3 numbers. And if you're interstate, it's your interstate student number. If you're not sure what your student number is, have a chat to your school. Your VCE coordinator or your careers practitioner will be able to help you out with your student number. So you make the account online, and once you've got the account, it looks a bit like this. You can then go straight on and click on Make a Course Application and get started with putting in your preferences. I'll just show you before we do that we also have a message center in your VTAC account. So if you click on that envelope icon, you'll see a copy of every email that VTAC's ever sent you. So if you've lost an email from VTAC, you can always find it by going back into your account. You can also click on that envelope and you'll see a link to contact VTAC as well, which is a great way to contact us because it's linked to your account. So we've already verified your identity there in case you have any personal questions. So you can, once you've got the account, just click on that Make an Application and we'll ask you a few more questions about your educational history. And then you'll come to this screen, the really important one, where you can put down the 8 different courses that you want to apply for within Victoria. So a single preference here is one particular course at a particular campus of a tertiary institution. So make sure if you're applying for a course that runs at different campuses, you're applying for the right campus. Otherwise, you might end up traveling a bit further than you expected to go to uni. The most important thing to know about the preferences screen is that you won't find out about all of them. You'll only receive an offer from the highest preference in each round that wants to make you an offer. So it's really important that you put the preferences down in the order that you actually want to do those courses. Let's say, for example, that we've filled in, let's say, 5 preferences. At the end of the year, all 5 of those courses are going to have a look at our application and decide if we get an offer. Let's say in this example, the first one says no, second one says yes, third one says yes, and all the rest actually say yes. So 4 of those courses are willing to make us an offer. But we're only going to receive one offer, which is from that second preference, because it was the highest preference that wanted to make us an offer. We're not going to find out about those lower preference offers because those places have already gone to someone else. So you can't pick between all the courses. You only get offered the highest preference that wants to accept you. That's why it's so important that you put them down in the order that you most want to study the courses. It's also good to keep in mind that you've got the same chance of getting into the same course, regardless of what preference level you put it at. So for the same course, if you put it first, or you put it fourth, or you put it last, you've got the same chance of getting in. There's no advantage to putting a course as your first preference. There's no disadvantage to putting it as your last preference. So just put them down in the order that you most want to complete those courses. Once you've put your preferences in, we ask you a few more questions, including one about something called supplementary offers. This is our backup system. And the way that it works is that if you have given permission for this process by saying yes, and then you don't receive any offers in the January round or the first round in February, we'll then make your application available to other courses that aren't on your preferences, but which still have places available. And they might give you a call and say, hey, based on your results and your preferences, we think you might be interested in our particular course. What do you say? If you say yes, you can get an offer. If you say no, that's the end of it. For most people, you will get an offer from your preferences in January or early in February, and you'll be taken off this list automatically. But it is a good backup option just in case. So we do encourage everyone to opt in and say yes for this one, just as a backup there. The last thing in this section is just to remind you that you can change your preferences as many times as you want to after applying. So when you've put your preferences in and put your application in for the first time, you can go straight back in and edit them and resubmit them, and you can keep doing that as many times as you want until the end of the year. So don't put off applying because you're not quite sure exactly which courses you want to put down yet. Do it early, and you can always come back and change your preferences later if you do change your mind. The most important deadline here is that Monday the 4th of January, which is the deadline before the first round. I'll explain a bit later why that's so important, but for now, just keep that in mind as the date by which you should finalize your preferences. Okay. If you've got any questions about the actual application process in terms of putting your preferences, that kind of thing, feel free to type those in now. I've got a couple that have come in already, and I'll start answering those, but do feel free to type in any further questions as well. So we have a question about the subject adjustments, if I can explain those again. So a subject adjustment is a particular subject that's been specified by a particular course that gives you some bonus points for that course. So they're usually subjects that are relevant to that particular course. Like an accounting course, for example, might say, if you do VCE accounting or VCE maths, we'll give you a few extra points for this particular course. They're not compulsory, they're not prerequisites, but if you have done them, they give you a bit of a bonus, they increase your selection rank and make it more likely that you'll get an offer. They're not there for all courses. If they are available, you'll see them in VTAC course search when you look at that course's information in the admission criteria section. Another question, after signing up to VTAC, do you have to fill in your preferences straight away? Not really. So there's 2 different steps to start with. The first one is making your VTAC account, which is just about kind of giving us your information, receiving your VTAC ID, and choosing your VTAC PIN. So that's not about your preferences yet. But once you've got the account, your next step that you can do at a later date if you want is to click on that Make an Application link, and then you can put your preferences in. So you can make your VTAC account already, even if you're not ready to put your preferences in. Another question, if you delete a course from your preferences, are you able to enter it in again if you change your mind? Yes, you can. So change of preference means you can add, remove, rearrange, do whatever you want in terms of what's on your preferences. The only exception is a small number of courses that have early closing dates. So medicine courses and fine arts courses like dance and drama and acting and so on, they often have early closing dates at the end of August or the end of September. So if you delete one of those early closing courses after it's already closed, you won't be able to put that back on your preferences later on. But that's only a very small number of courses. And if it's got an early closing date, it's always published in VTAC Course Search, so you'll know about it as well. Okay, let's move on then and talk about special consideration and scholarships. You might have heard the word SEAS, which stands for the Special Entry Access Scheme, which is the big special consideration program that's used by all the universities and most of the TAFEs and colleges in Victoria, which means that you can fill out the application form once through your VTAC account, and that covers all of your preferences. Primarily, SEAS is about particular conditions or circumstances beyond your control, which have caused educational disadvantage, but it does also include something called Category 1, which everyone should apply for, and I'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. Before I talk about the actual categories for SEAS though, I'll just discuss what SEAS actually does. So it's about allowing the selection officers to grant special consideration for course entry, so increasing your selection rank to compensate for disadvantage. So SEAS is not a separate app, it's not like a separate way of applying. You're still putting in preferences, you're still in that big list with everyone else. SEAS does not exempt you from the course requirements, so things like any interviews or prerequisites or auditions or folios, that kind of thing, you must still do those. So it won't guarantee you an offer, but what it will do, if you're eligible, is increase your selection rank and make it more likely that you'll receive an offer. And in our example from earlier, applying for and receiving special consideration through SEAS is one of the reasons why AJ got an offer ahead of Emma, even though his ATAR was lower than hers. So there's 4 categories within SEAS, and you can apply for as many of them as match your individual circumstances. The first one though, category 1, is something that everyone should be applying for. It's really easy to apply for. You're just ticking a box and pressing submit. And by ticking that box, what you're doing is giving VTAC permission to use your personal information to give you any kind of automatic adjustments for factors based on your personal information, all the things that we already know about you. So for example, we know where you live, we know your address, so we can automatically give you consideration for living in a regional or remote area as part of this category. We know which school you go to if you're in year 12, so we can automatically give you consideration for coming from an underrepresented school at a particular institution. We know your age, so we can automatically give you mature age consideration, and so on for a whole range of other factors, including recognition as an Indigenous Australian, coming from a non-English speaking background, being the first in your family to attend tertiary study, and being underrepresented in terms of gender in a particular course. There's a whole bunch of things that fall under category 1, and they're all automatic as long as you tick that box to give permission. So everyone should be doing that. The absolute worst possible thing that can happen, the worst outcome, is that nothing changes and your selection rank stays the same, and you've wasted that 2 seconds ticking a box. So we absolutely encourage everyone to tick category 1 and then go on to apply for any of the other categories which apply to your situation. The second category is category 2, about your financial background. So usually you'd qualify for this with receipt in your name or your parent or guardian's name of any Centrelink benefit or family tax benefit A or B, or any other kind of financial disadvantage. The third category is for any kind of disability or medical condition which affects you personally. And the last category, category 4, is for anything else. So it's called difficult circumstances, and it's for any other circumstances which are beyond your control and not already covered in a previous category and have negatively affected your education. This often includes things like if someone very close to you becomes very ill or passes away, and the other examples that you can see there on the screen. What you put in that category, actually, we'll talk about evidence first instead. So, in terms of evidence, if you're applying for this first category here, you don't need any extra evidence. You just tick the box and you're done with that particular category. But if you're applying for any of the other categories, you will need to provide some kind of evidence, usually some written statements. So, we'll give you a brief summary now of those evidence requirements. I'm not going to go through it in heaps of detail because it doesn't apply to everyone, but there is a lot more information on our website about the detail of what to provide in terms of evidence for Cs. So in terms of evidence for category 2, the financial category, there's a few different options here. If you personally are receiving a Centrelink benefit in your own name, for example, the youth allowance, you can just give us your Centrelink reference number or CRN, and we can confirm that payment electronically with Centrelink. But that only works if the payment's in your own name. If you're in year 12, the payment's probably in your parents' name. Your parents receiving a family tax benefit or a Centrelink payment. You're still eligible for this category, but you've got to apply with this middle option, which is a scanned copy that you upload of your parent or guardian's Centrelink or family tax benefit statement. If you're not eligible or your family is not eligible for any of those benefits, but you are still financially disadvantaged, you can apply with this last option here, which is written statements. So an impact statement, which you write yourself online as part of the application form, telling us about the situation, and a statement of support that comes from someone who's not related to you or living with you and can verify that situation. So it might be someone at school or it might be someone like a social worker who can verify the impact of your financial situation on your education. So a few different options here, but for most year 12 students, it'll be that middle option here of a scanned and uploaded copy of a Centrelink benefit statement. Okay. In terms of the other categories, so 3 and 4, for most applications here, you'll need written statements. So there'll be an impact statement you write yourself about the condition, the medical condition, or the circumstance as part of the application form, and then a statement of support that comes from someone like your doctor or someone at school who can verify those circumstances. That's for most applications under the categories 3 and 4, but there are some other particular circumstances where there's a special process for providing this information. So if you're applying on the basis of sexual assault, family violence, homelessness, formal out-of-home care, having been a refugee or asylum seeker, or being impacted by the bushfires over summer this year, there's a special process for you, and you'll need to indicate that on the application form, which means you won't need to write an impact statement. There's also a special process for the impact of remote learning as a result of COVID-19. And I will go through that one because that does apply to lots of people this particular year. In terms of the impacts of COVID-19, there's a few different categories or types of things that affected people. Obviously, everyone's been affected in some way, and a lot of the impact has affected every single year 12. So every year 12 has had to do remote learning and was a bit disrupted during the switch to remote learning at short notice. Every year 12 has not been able to study in groups, they've experienced social disconnection, they've definitely had way too much screen time. For these universal impacts, you can't apply for Cs for those things because everyone experienced those things, which means that they're already reflected in the ATAR because the ATAR is a rank. It's not a score out of 100, it's a rank showing your relative performance compared to everyone else this year. The ATAR is not comparing you to students from last year when there was no pandemic. It's comparing you to students from this year who've all experienced those universal impacts of COVID-19. So you can't apply for Cs for those things. The state government made an announcement on Friday of a new process as part of the VCE, where your study scores might be adjusted, and that might include some of those factors. So you might hear more from the Victorian Curriculum and Assessment Authority about that particular scheme. But in terms of Cs, you can't apply for Cs for those universal factors. But some things, particularly to do with remote learning, affected people differently. They weren't universal. Maybe you had a different experience remote learning than someone you'd normally sit next to at school just because of your situation at home. Maybe you don't have proper internet access, or you didn't have a suitable laptop or tablet that you could do your work from. So, for those circumstances which affected people individually as a result of remote learning, there's a special streamlined process as part of Category 4 where you can apply for special consideration on that basis. It's a streamlined process, so you're just ticking some boxes to tell us about particular aspects of your remote learning, and you don't need to write any written statements about that. But there were also people who were affected beyond remote learning by the pandemic in ways that were often quite severe. So, for example, your family may have experienced some quite severe economic hardship as a result of the pandemic. You might have had a mental health condition that was brought about by or exacerbated by the pandemic restrictions. So, for things like this, which aren't universal but go beyond remote learning, you should definitely apply for Cs, and you'll do that by following the usual process. So it might be using written statements, or, for example, using the special family violence process there if that was a result of the pandemic. So to summarize this briefly, things that affected everyone, you can't apply for Cs for those things. Things to do with remote learning, you just use that simple tick box process as part of Category 4. And for everything else, you apply using the standard Cs process in the relevant category. So Category 2 for financial, 3 for medical or disability, and 4 for everything else in terms of difficult circumstances. And I'll just pause and take some questions here before we go on and talk about scholarships next. You can see we've had quite a few come in. So I might not get to all the questions. I'll just answer a couple of them now, and we'll try and come back and get to the rest of them at the end if we have time. So a couple of questions about preferences that I might come back to. I think the questions about COVID were asked before I covered that, so hopefully that's clear now. Feel free to type those ones back in if you do have any other COVID questions. We've got a question about school closures and whether you'd apply for Cs on that basis. The answer is no. The school closures are going to be managed separately. We're going to get that data straight from the schools because that affected all the students all at once. So you wouldn't need to put a Cs application in for the school closures. Here's a good question. If you've already done preferences and then are going to go for Cs, do you have to re-enter preferences? No. So you put in your preferences and then you apply for Cs. That's correct. But then you can keep changing your preferences and your Cs application will stay there. So your Cs application will apply to your preferences no matter how many times you change your preferences. You only have to fill it out once, even though you can keep going back and editing it until the closing date if you want to. Okay. Yep. So a question about actually some questions about individual situations, which I won't get into at the moment, but I'll give you some information at the end about how to contact VTAC for advice with your specific situation there. And I think we'll move on for now, but come back to other questions a little bit later on. So the last thing to do after we've done our preferences and our Cs application is to apply for scholarships. So the scholarship application is available in your VTAC account, and just like with Cs, it's a single application form that you fill out once, and then it covers you for a few hundred different scholarships at various different universities throughout Victoria. So there's two important things to know about the scholarships. First of all, they're not just academic. So you might hear the word scholarship and think 99.95, and it's true there are some academic scholarships, but there are also heaps more for other reasons like access and equity, community service, and leadership, and so on. So it is worth everyone applying for scholarships. The other thing to know is that the VTAC scholarships application covers a lot, but not all scholarships. There are even more scholarships outside this process that require their own separate applications. So our advice is to start with the VTAC application, but then also go on to have a look for other scholarships outside this process we'll have to apply individually for. If you're in year 12, your careers practitioner at school is a great source of information about scholarships because they know you and they know your local area as well. So they may be able to recommend some particular scholarships for you. Okay, I'll move straight on and we'll come back to any questions about scholarships a bit later on, just to make sure we can finish on time. So we've done our preferences, Cs, and scholarships. And now we can kind of relax until the end of the year, or I guess study and do our exams until the end of the year. And then you'll find out your ATAR and your VCE results on the 30th of December this year. So it's a little bit later than usual as a result of the delays to the VCE exam and assessment schedule caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. So you can access your ATAR online at that Results in ATAR website or in the free Results in ATAR app that you can get for Apple and Android phones. To use either of those services, you will have to register and choose a secure password at some point between now and December. You can do that at the Results in ATAR website, so make sure you do that before the end of the year to protect your results and make sure you can access them on that release date. If you're in year 11 and you've done a single year 12 subject this year, you can do that as well. Choose a secure password and you'll use that to get your individual study score for that one subject this year. If you did that last year, and you're now in year 12, you'll need to make a new password this year to view your ATAR. Those passwords only last for 1 year. You've got to re-register every year that you're getting results. Once you've got your ATAR, you've got about 5 days where you can change your preferences if you want to, and then the first deadline happens for the January offer round. So there are 5 rounds of offers that are made, but as you can see in this graph, the number of offers that gets made in each round decreases as we get later in the year. So the first round here, the January round, is the most important because that's where the majority of offers get made. So even though you can change your preferences between all the offer rounds, if you're waiting until this point here, before the last round, to put your dream course on your preferences, the number of offers left is very low. Your dream course might be full already. So that's why that deadline here before the first round is so important, the 4th of January deadline. That's the deadline to focus on in terms of making sure that you've got your preferences there in the order that you actually want to do those courses. On the date of each offer round, you'll get an email from VTAC in the morning which tells you what course you've been offered, and that same information is available online from 2 p.m. and also in the newspaper the next day if you gave permission when you applied. The email from VTAC just tells you what course you've been offered. That's followed up by a second email which comes straight from the University TAFE or college, and that tells you how to accept the offer by enrolling for the course. So you don't tell VTAC that you're accepting the offer, you do it directly with the University TAFE or college. Similarly, if you want to defer the course, which means putting off the start for a year, you do that once you've got your offer directly with that university, TAFE or college, not with VTAC. And to reject your offer, you just do nothing and it will automatically expire on the deadline specified in those enrolment instructions. But we strongly advise you never to reject an offer. You should always accept an offer that you receive to lock it in there as a backup, even if you're hoping for a higher preference, because the offer process will continue no matter whether you accept, defer, or reject your offer. You will still be automatically considered for any higher preference courses. So in this example, we've got someone who's been offered their 5th preference here in the first round. They should accept that offer and lock it in there as a backup, even if they are hoping for one of their higher preferences. If this person hasn't changed their mind, they can just accept the offer and leave it alone, and they'll be automatically reconsidered for their first 4 preferences because they're higher preferences than the offer already received. But if they've changed their mind, they do also have the option to change their preferences. They might decide they want this 6th preference now, and they can just move that up above what they've been offered, and that will then be considered in the next round. They could even add a new course, and as long as they move it up above what they've been offered, that will also be considered in the next round. So you do have some options even after you get an offer, but it is important to accept what you receive. So in this example, they should accept that fifth preference. If they do get a better offer later on, maybe the second preference here, they can then accept that and go back and withdraw from that first offer. That's a very normal process. It happens every year. That place they withdrew from will then go to someone else in the third round. Okay, we'll just do a couple of questions about offers before moving on, and then we're talking about the ATAR. Okay. No offers questions, a few more about Cs that we'll try and get to at the end. So for now, I'll just barrel on and go straight through to scaling and the ATAR. So if you're in year 12, the ATAR is probably on your mind a fair bit. Do try and keep it in perspective as you go through the year though. And remember that the ATAR is not a score for your VCE. It's not a definition of who you are or anything like that. It's purely one of many tools that are used for getting into a tertiary course. Once you've used your ATAR for that purpose, for getting into a course, no one's ever going to ask you about it ever again. No one's going to care what it was. So even though it seems very important for you right now, do try and keep in mind that it is just a tool for getting into a course. It's not the outcome of your VCE or anything like that. In fact, the ATAR is not a score at all. It's not a score out of 100. It's a rank which shows your relative performance compared to everyone else in your age group. So an ATAR of 50 is not 50 out of 100. An ATAR of 50 means you've performed better than 50% of your year 12 age group. How do we calculate the ATAR? There's 3 steps you can see there at the bottom of the screen, and I'll go through each of them individually. But briefly, there's a scaling process to make sure we can make fair comparisons between different combinations of subjects. We then add up everyone's individual subjects to produce their aggregate or total score. And the last step is to convert all of those aggregates into the ATAR, which is a percentile rank. So we'll go through those 3 steps now, starting off with the scaling process. Why is scaling needed? The reason that scaling is needed is because of how we get your results from the VCAA at the end of the year. The study scores are not actually a score. They're also a rank. So for every single VCE subject, when we get the results at the end of the year, they all look the same. They all look like this: a bell curve or a normal distribution with an average of 30. So if you are exactly in the middle of a subject, exactly average, you'll get 30 in that particular subject, regardless of what marks you needed on the exam or the assessments to be average in that subject. Similarly, if you get, let's say, for example, 45, that means you're in the top 2% of that particular subject. Again, regardless of what marks you needed to get in that top 2%. So we want to know how hard it was to be average and get 30 in each subject, because different people do different combinations of subjects. So it might be easier or harder to get that middle position. The scaling process is about answering that question, and I'll show you an example of how that works in a moment. Before I get there though, just remember that the scaling process is just about the ATAR calculation. So we only use those scaled scores for the ATAR. If you're looking at prerequisites or subject adjustments or anything else, that's always your original study score. The scaled scores are just for the ATAR calculation. So how do we do it? We'll use chemistry as an example. When we get those chemistry scores at the end of the year, we already know what they're going to look like. It's going to be that bell curve again with that average of 30. So we want to know how hard was it to get 30 and be average in chemistry this particular year. We answer that question by looking at the performance of chemistry students in all their other subjects. So chemistry students, but how they performed in English and music and maths, physics, psychology, politics, philosophy, all their other VCA subjects. In this example, the students have performed above average in all their other subjects. That shows us that chemistry was a more competitive subject. It would have been harder to be in the middle and be average and get 30 in chemistry. So as a result, chemistry will scale up in this particular year. So scaling is not about how hard or how easy a particular subject is. It's purely about the level of competition in this particular year. We do this same process for every single VCE and VCE vet subject every year. It's not predetermined. The scaling process is also not about you as an individual or about your school or about your class rank or anything like that. The scaling process involves all Victorian students in that subject in one big group, being scaled as a big group together. We don't start looking at individual students until the next step, which is adding up your total or your aggregate. To receive an ATAR, you must have done at least 4 scored subjects, including one from the English group. We call that your primary 4, and that's the minimum required to receive an ATAR. But if you've done more than 4 subjects, so you've done 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9, we can use up to 2 more as what are called increments, which might be 10% of your next highest scaled score or your result for university study, that kind of thing. We then add up all of those scaled scores or contributions to your ATAR to produce a number that's called your aggregate or total. And you'll see that printed on your ATAR statement at the end of the year. The last step is to put all of those aggregates in order so that we can break them up and make them into the ATAR, which is a rank. So an ATAR of 70, for example, means that your aggregate or total score was higher than 70% of your year 12 age group. So you can't add up your subjects to get your ATAR because that's a rank. You add them up to get your aggregate, and then the ATAR is a rank based on everyone's aggregates. Remember though, the ATAR is not everything. It is just a tool for getting into some courses. It's way more common for courses to use the ATAR plus other criteria as well, and for some courses not to use the ATAR at all. So there are many ways to go on and achieve your goals. Don't get too fixated on the ATAR this particular year. Okay, that's the end of the presentation today. So what I'll do now is give you some advice on where to get further information, and then we'll see how many of those other questions we can get through before we wrap up tonight. If you are in year 12, I do really recommend having a chat to your careers practitioner at school. They're a great source of information about you and the VTAC process. We've also got lots of information on the VTAC website at vtac.edu.au in terms of detailed instructions and so on. And you're also welcome to contact us if you do have any questions about the particular VTAC process. So you can call us on that number on the screen, or you can click on that envelope icon in your account to email us. We do also respond on Facebook, but we can't discuss personal information over Facebook, just general questions there. So better to call or email if the question is about your individual application. So I'll try and get through a few of these questions now in the next 2 minutes, and then we'll see how we go. So, question about what counts towards the study score. Is it your exam results? The study scores are calculated by the VCAA, which is the Victorian Curriculum and Assessment Authority, and they add up a variety of things to get your score. It's usually a combination of your exam result and your school-based assessments, so SACs and things that you do at school. Question about deferring or taking a gap year and what the best thing to do is. If you're looking at taking a gap year, so you want to start university, TAFE or college in a year's time rather than a couple of months' time, what you should do is apply now. So submit an application, as we've just discussed, and then once you get your offer, you can usually, but not always, you can usually defer that course. And deferring means putting it off for a year. If you accept a place this year and defer it for next year, that's guaranteed for you next year. So you don't have to apply again when it comes to next year and you want to take it up. You just go straight back in, but a year later. So the best thing to do is to apply now and defer your place. That way it's guaranteed for you and you can enjoy your gap year without stress. If you're not sure what you want to do though, you can put it off. You can apply next year instead. It's a similar process, even if you're not currently in year 12, if you've already graduated. And in terms of deferment, there's a few more questions about that as well. Deferment is up to each individual course. So a lot of courses can be deferred, but not all of them. It's up to each individual course where they allow that. There's some information often on their websites about which courses can be deferred, or you can just give them a call and they'll be able to help you out in terms of giving you information about that. Question from someone who's made a mistake in terms of what they've put on the VTAC account with the spelling of their name. If you make a mistake with anything on your account, you can often fix it up yourself just by editing the field in your account. Or for something like your name where you can't edit it, just give us a call or send us an email to request a correction, and our customer service team will help you out with that one. Okay. Question: what happens if you've forgotten to finalize your preferences? Um, you can't apply it without putting in at least some preferences. So you've always got a list of preferences, and if you don't change those preferences later on, they'll just stay there, and that's what will be considered for offers. So put some preferences in early for things you think you might want to do, but you can always go back in and make changes and rearrange them at any time. If it gets to the end of the year and you've got your ATAR and you haven't changed your mind, your preferences still reflect what you want to do, there's no need to change them. You can just leave them as is, and they'll be considered finalized. Okay, we might wrap up there. Thanks so much for coming along, and good luck for the rest of the year, everyone.
Thanks, Michael. On behalf of CEAV, thank you very much for your time this evening. I can see there have been a few other questions in the chat box, so happy to hang back, but I'll end the recording now.